everyone has a story, and so does everything. Antique, vintage, or curio. Artifacts are designed to intrigue. Was it held dear by a family across generations, or was it picked up along the way? What drove its creation? What made its current keeper take notice? Watch as curiosity breathes new life into forgotten treasures on The Past and the Curious. Today on The Past and the Curious, a small engine that increases the power of a household, an embalming table that holds somber memories of the Titanic disaster, and a butler's desk that optimized the household workspace. Case looks at a gas engine from the iconic Acadia Gas Company.
These engines at the time, they would have been life-saving. They would have changed people's lives drastically.
Rebecca looks at an embalming table with haunting memories of the Titanic.
It's actually quite literally stained with history. Not only is it an amazing piece, but it's also a showcase of the class divide.
Sandy looks at an antique butler's desk, which has preserved its functionality through the ages.
When we look at a piece of furniture like this, what we're really seeing is the first computer.
My name is Donna McGregor, and I have brought in a butler's desk. I happened to be called into a home for a gentleman who was downsizing. The minute I saw it, I was intrigued, and he said he told me that it was called a butler's chest. He showed me how it worked, and I had to have it.
By the 1820s, during the late years of the Regency period, furniture was thoughtfully crafted and beautiful, resulting in its timeless appeal. It was also practical and personal, reflecting the specific needs of a household, especially those of significant means. The English butler's desk is a perfect example of these qualities. Disguised as a simple chest of drawers, its purpose and functionality go far beyond. As the name suggests, it was a design that prioritized its user. The top drawers concealed a fold-down workstation and storage for the stationery required to organize staff and manage domestic affairs. Though personal office spaces of the 21st century have replaced these heavy wooden structures with streamlined designs and rudimentary writing utensils with paper-thin laptops, the need for a dedicated workspace persists, as does the striking character of the now antique butler's desk.
Thank you for coming on the show today. Could you tell us a bit about what you've brought in?
Is a butler's chest of drawers or a butler's desk. I'm guessing probably from the early 1800s. I believe it is mahogany with a pearl walnut veneer on front.
So this is a really lovely piece you've brought in today, Donna. And of course, when one looks at it, it sort of just appears to be a regular chest of drawers. When we open it up here, it of course holds a wonderful secret inside. We pull it out, press a couple of buttons, and the front drops down to reveal this great desk surface. So what we're looking at here is a piece, I would say, probably closer to circa 1825, 1830. The form originally is coming out of England, of course, out of these grand country houses that we now see portrayed in television. It's essentially a very useful piece of furniture for the time that was designed so that the butler, generally in his room, in his quarters that he would have lived in, or in his small office, would have had a very usable piece of furniture on which to conduct his business. Of course, the butler is running the household in this period, and so he would have had a lot of communication coming across his desk, ordering various things, setting up appointments, and so on. So that would have all been conducted within a desk such as this. And of course, when we look at a piece of furniture like this, what we're really seeing is the first computer. These various drawers and pigeonholes are all holding different pieces of stationery, inks, sealing wax, and all that sort of thing that was necessary for day-to-day life and communication. The form is really designed to be a compact piece of furniture with which a lot can be done. That was sort of why this was designed to fold back in on itself, so that when the business had been conducted, it could just be neatly compartmentalized in what would have been generally a very small space that the butler would have been allotted.
Could you give me a little rundown of what actually the butler would have done at this desk?
The butler's role can be divided into two sort of sections. There would be the part of his job that was seen, which would have been helping with serving and answering doors and that sort of thing, which would have been upstairs, if you will. But downstairs, where he would have had his quarters and his office and so on, he would have been responsible for ordering food and wine and keeping track of the household silver and of many other things such as that. So there would have been a lot of accounting and that sort of thing. And he would have been responsible for picking of the wine and helping with choosing the menus and so on. So all of this requiring a great deal of writing, communication to various different people in the house as well as outside the house.
When I first saw it, I thought it would be a great compartmentalizing home workspace. And it's got enough room to pull up a chair and put a laptop on so it works in multiple centuries, perhaps.
When one thinks about it, many of the tools which we are using today are very similar to what we would have been using 220 years ago. You can be very well using these drawers for pens and pencils and things such as that, which we've been using since that time. And of course, the desk is sort of, in its different forms, has remained a very desirable piece of furniture within the home because people have always needed to either work from home or do little tasks that really can't be accomplished so well at anything other than a desk. Particularly because you're sort of keeping yourself centralized and organized, so you're not having your different writing pieces and various papers all strewn around the house, but you're keeping them all together where they're easily accessible and neatly kept.
And when you're done with it, you just fold up the top drawer. It's invisible.
Exactly.
In your line of work, do you see people looking for these pieces?
Certain pieces are starting to become popular again. And in particular, pieces that can be efficiently used within the home, are smaller in scale, and serve a real purpose, are particularly desirable nowadays. And one of those pieces is a desk such as this. Something like this that's smaller, can fit in a corner, and still be very useful is still a desirable piece today.
Certainly with the movement to smaller homes.
Exactly. So, it's pieces that are useful and compact that are really driving the market now. And this is, of course, a really good example of that.
And it's certainly beautiful as well.
Exactly. Thank you for bringing this on the show today. Can you tell us a bit about what your plans are for it going forward?
I probably will move this one along just because it is of the shape and size that doesn't quite go with my decor. I know what I paid for it. I wonder, can you tell me what I could possibly sell it for?
If we look at sort of an insurance number, which is a good way to look at things, I would appraise a piece such as this to be worth somewhere in the region of probably $2,000 to $3,000 for insurance purposes.
That's great. Great. Thank you.
Would you be willing to sell this to me for $2,000? Is that...
I would, Sandy. I honestly would. I think that would make the previous owner happy.
Right. Well, that's wonderful.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
My name is Jenna McPhee, and I have brought in an embalming table today. I have been a museum interpreter at the East Hants Historical Society for the past 6 summers. I have dealt a lot with the embalming table over the course of the summers. Really important that we have it, and it's nice for people to be able to come and see it as well.
Hauntingly hailed as unsinkable, the RMS Titanic was the largest and most extravagant British passenger liner of its time. The social status of the over 2,000 aboard varied greatly, and only the rich were privy to its comfort and luxuries. The wealthiest among them was the American business magnate John Jacob Astor, who, by today's standards, would have been worth over $2 billion. On April 14, 1912, the Titanic struck an iceberg while crossing the Atlantic on its maiden voyage. 1,500 passengers perished. Due to Halifax's proximity, many of the deceased were brought and buried there. But more affluent families opted for embalming to ensure the return of their loved ones. Embalming dates back to 5000 BCE, but the practice was gaining popularity among high society, which is why John Jacob Astor would have received this treatment. The memory of this tragedy lives on in memorials worldwide, including in Nova Scotia, where its artifacts are kept in the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic's permanent collection.
Thank you so much for coming in today and bringing us this quite large piece. What can you tell us about it?
So this is actually an embalming table. It's from the time period of the Titanic, which is the main importance of this. It was used to embalm John Jacob Astor, who was the richest man aboard the Titanic when it sunk.
Well, isn't that interesting? And what an interesting thing for you to have in front of us today. Let's start with a little bit of a descriptor. It's a wooden maid with this wonderful caning throughout. And then I think you were showing that it can actually open up a bit as well.
Yeah, both ends
Both
actually
ends.
extend.
Oh, I'm slightly terrified of it.
And these do go up at some point too.
Okay,
once
so
you
that
get
would
them
be
out so far.
possibly to maybe lift or elevate a body?
Maybe, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, that's a thought, isn't it? So with this beautiful embalming table that was brought in today, it definitely has a hardwood base, and then it has this beautiful caning throughout it that it's really well preserved for the age, and it's actually quite literally stained with history. So what has the Historical Society learned about this table, and what can you tell me?
The table was originally owned by John Logan. He was a person that was in Shubenacadie. He owned a carriage house, but he was also a local embalmer. He had this table, took it to Halifax. Then it was passed on to Ernest Ettinger, who bought the funeral home, also got the embalming table, and then his son took it over, and then eventually we ended up with the embalming table.
The Titanic hit the iceberg on April 14th and then subsequently sunk on the 15th of April, early in the morning. Of the over 1,500 bodies that went into the water with the sinking of the Titanic, only 337 were actually recovered from the water. And John Jacob Astor's body was one of those on April the 22nd, 7 days after the sinking of the Titanic. And John Jacob Astor's body wasn't actually recovered for 7 days. It was recovered on the 22nd of April, which, if you ask me, is a long time to be in the water. And so when they brought these bodies back to Halifax, there were so many for them to deal with that they did a call out for embalming tables around the province, which is how this table would have ended up in Halifax to do that work. It would actually have been uncommon for the bodies from the Titanic to be embalmed. Not only is it an amazing piece, but it's also a showcase of the class divide. He was brought out of the water. He was given the opportunity to be embalmed on the nicest embalming table available in Nova Scotia at that time. And then his body was actually sent to New York, where it was buried, while many of the other bodies that were pulled from the water, particularly anyone who would have been in third class, was just buried in a cemetery in Halifax.
And in his case, too, because his body was sent back to New York, they would have actually needed that in order for the family to claim the inheritance from him because he was so wealthy as well.
Oh, so that's so interesting. So the main reason for the embalming was also about ensuring that inheritance gets passed along.
Yeah.
Wow, that really puts this in a very different context. This table would have just been a tool for an embalmer. It would have just been as we would drive a car around or we use our computer, it's just another tool. However, its connection with John Jacob Astor and the fact that it was used for the Titanic and was likely used for subsequent major events in Nova Scotia, such as the Halifax explosion, the onset of the Spanish flu, it wouldn't be surprising to think that this table would be used for that. The reason we get to use it now is because of this John Jacob Astor connection. And the people that kept it did that because they knew it had this connection. And as a result, we get to have this great conversation, not just about the wealthy John Jacob Astor, not just about the sinking of the Titanic, but about this tool and this method of preserving bodies at this time in history. This table represents, a piece of the evolution of embalming. It starts as far back as 2000 BC in Peru. We see it with the mummies in Egypt. And then as time goes on, these processes change. And it was really important as well to find ways to safely take care of and dispose of our bodies because diseases can be spread with bodies being left around. You can, obviously there's the scent and also just the visual aspect of it that can be a problem. And so finding ways to care for our dead has been kind of a problem that we've faced for years. So what's interesting about this embalming table is it's part of this time as we were finding different chemicals that we could put into bodies. You start with arsenic, which of course is a very dangerous poison. There was mercury, which again, I can't imagine what this was like. I don't think the embalmers would have had great personal protective equipment. And all the way up until formaldehyde, which, is considered a carcinogen to this day. And so, these are different dangerous things that would have been used as we tried our best to make bodies safe. But, what was the effect on the embalmer or the people around it? And it wasn't until the American Civil War that we really started seeing more regular folks be embalmed. Of about the 600,000 people that died during the American Civil War, about 40,000 of them were embalmed, which if you think that no one was really being embalmed before that, that's a big number. And it really kind of brought into the mainstream this idea of embalming, which was later supported by the fact that Abraham Lincoln's body was embalmed. And this was such a great leader that people looked up to. And so when they saw that, someone like that was being embalmed, it really popularized the idea. Jenna, thank you so much for bringing this really interesting piece for us to talk about today. Can you give me a little bit of an idea what the plans are with it moving forward?
So currently it sits in the museum that's run by the East Hants Historical Society as part of the exhibits that are there, and it's an artifact that's in the museum, so everyone can come and take a look at it if they find it interesting or they just want to see it up close. Being able to see it in person really does give you a very different visual than I'm sure it does look on screen. In terms of value, given the condition of this piece, the historical significance, I would definitely kind of have to decide that the value of this piece is priceless. The historical value of this piece outweighs any possibility of a monetary value. To us, it is really an extraordinary piece to have in the museum. The Titanic Society has come in to view the piece. They have gotten photographs taken in front of it. And it's also been loaned to the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic in Nova Scotia in 2012 when they had their 100th anniversary of the Titanic sinking. So we loaned it to them in order to display with their other artifacts that they had. So yeah, definitely priceless.
Thank you, Jenna, so much for bringing this piece in.
Thank you, Rebecca, for giving your insight into this piece as well.
What I realized looking at this table is not just the history of the Titanic or the history of this wealthy man, but the history of the embalming table and the importance of that.
My name is John Eaton, and I brought in a 2-horsepower Acadia gas engine. Well, I find them fascinating. They're a lot of fun. The fun of finding them, the fun of restoring them, and the fun of running them. And most people, when that engine is running, will just stand and look. And people love that sound.
In 1908, on the edge of Bridgewater's LaHave River, the Acadia Gas Engines Company was founded by Winfred T. Ritzie. A manufacturer of affordable internal combustion engines, its target market were the inshore fishermen of Atlantic Canada. In hindsight, Ritzie's initial ambitions were humble compared to what he would accomplish. Acadia gas products were internationally renowned as top tier. At its height, the company was producing 2,400 marine engines a year, not only for its 1,200 Canadian retailers, but for customers all over the globe, making it the country's largest manufacturer. Today, Shipyards Landing, a community park in Bridgewater, takes the place of the now demolished, though forever historic, Acadia Gas Engines Complex.
First of all, I'd like to welcome you here, John. This is a very interesting looking, colorful item you have. Where did you come across this engine?
This one came from Clark's Harbor. A gentleman down there had 3 little engines, this one and 2 other makes, and a friend of mine bought the 3 of them. It's called a stationary engine. This particular one is called an Acadia gas engine, stationary engine. Acadia gas engines were built in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, so this is local. They were sold all over the world. A lot of them were sold here in Prince Edward Island, and especially in Newfoundland. The Newfoundlanders would take them, and sometimes they'd get somewhere and they'd sell them there, and so the thing ended up everywhere. I've been collecting these things for quite a while, but you're an expert. So now maybe you could tell me a little bit about this engine that I don't know.
Well, I would say you're probably quite an expert on these. The company was founded in 1908 in Bridgewater. It ended up being quite a large company over the years. It lasted up until 1980 or so, if I recall correctly. These were mainly for the fishing industry, which you obviously know. And then not so much, but they were trying to market towards homeowners after a while, for your wash machines, for your turnip pulpers, for whatever you can hook a belt up to. Mm-hmm. These engines at the time, they would have been life-saving. They would have changed people's lives drastically. The labor-saving aspect of them was incredible. It made mundane tasks bearable. You could focus on different things, less people. It really changed life for a lot of people.
What people used to do, a lot of them would hook these to a water pump. And when they hooked them to a water pump, the water pump was at the brook or the lake or wherever it was. They would have a big tank up in the top of the barn or the top of the house, and that would be their running water for the day. So they'd start this engine up, they'd measure the exact amount of fuel, and they'd start the engine going, and they'd walk away. And the engine would pump water until the cistern was full. And just about time the cistern became full, the engine would stall because it would run out of gas.
So these machines were extremely versatile.
Oh, yeah.
They were used for all sorts of things around the farm if you were lucky enough to have one. They were used for turnip pulpers, for saws, quite a few different things. You also have all of the marine applications. So it was really quite a versatile machine.
This particular little one and all of the other Acadias, the 6 and the 10, were specifically in the beginning for a hauler. So this one had a little hauler that went on the back, little capstan, and that was for hauling up the lobster traps. But the bigger one, the 6, that had a little larger, was called a haul-up winch. And the haul-up winch was used for things like putting up the sails on the big schooners. They could be used for lowering the anchor or raising the anchor or whatever. Then there was the 10 horsepower, and the big friction winch on the back of that was used for pulling boats ashore. And every little community that had a few boats got one of these from the Canadian government. They would use that to pull their boats up after they were through with their fishing. The 10 horsepower will pull a boat in the 3-ton range. So they pulled quite a large boat,
Yeah.
but not big like we think of ships today, but a good-sized fishing boat.
It's quite easy to forget how much of an impact these machines had on life back then.
This particular one is very similar to one that a 90-year-old lady had in a community not very far from my place. And she had a unit in that this engine ran an air pump, and it was a 2-cylinder air pump. And that air pump pumped air down the well. And the water came up and filled a 400 or 500 gallon tank. So every week she would go out and start that engine right up into her 90s.
Yeah.
She still did that. So when you hear things like that, you can start to think about the impact it had on people, and what it meant.
In the early 1900s, life was difficult. So when these engines were starting to be produced and became a part of daily life, it really changed the average person's life from, a mundane, grueling workday into something that was a little more bearable. So what are your plans with it in the future?
My plans in the future are these are just things that I enjoy having. I don't take them out and show them to people very often anymore. I've moved on to other things that I think are more fun. I've got a rough idea of what I think it's worth. What do you think it might be worth on the open market?
Well, generally, if you're lucky enough to find an engine similar to this, yeah, I would probably price it at about $600.
Okay, thank you. That's probably pretty close to where I thought it might be. And I don't think I'm interested in selling it this time, but it's good to know what it's worth and for future reference.
I'd like to thank you for coming in. It's been great to see you and your loved machine.
Well, thank you very much for talking with me. I appreciate it. It's nice to find somebody that's interested enough to talk. Sometimes people aren't, as you mentioned earlier. Sometimes people just, it's gone, forgotten. But sometimes I run into people who are still interested.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.